Welcome to the Lovefly podcast. Paul Tizard here, a fear of flying coach. And today we have a superstar back with us, Jamie Part 2. Welcome back, Jamie.
Oh, thank you for having me. What a lovely way to be introduced.
Well, it's true. Your podcast episode has been very popular because you did particularly because you talk about a few things like fear of heights and a few other things. You've got some nice visualization things. That's been massively helpful for people. So I just thought that we were long overdue. It's actually Geeta messaged me. She said, "What happened to Jamie? I thought he was going to do a part two." And I thought, "You're right. We've let it slip." So how's it
Well, here
going?
we are. Yeah, here we are.
So tell me, how's the flying going? You've done some flights, and it's been a while since we last spoke and did our official podcast. So tell me how it's going now in terms of flying. What's going well? What's not going so well? Perhaps give us a mini potted history of where you were when we first were talking about fear of flying.
Sure. Okay. Well, I first came to your attention in episode 81, which is now 13, 14 months ago. It's a very long time.
Wow.
It's gone so quickly, and listeners hopefully will remember that what I'd done in episode 81 was I'd given my life story up to that point in terms of flying and all the trials and tribulations I'd been through and the things that had gone well, the things that hadn't, some of the tips I'd learned along the way. So I thought what we'd do now is bring you up to date with what's happened in the last year,
Mm.
because the sharper listeners will remember that in episode 81 I was planning to go to America in October, and I was taking the family to Florida, and that at the time I was in the middle of what turned out to be 8 months of preparation. So yeah, this was in May last year that we did episode 81. So I'd started, I think, in January, preparing for a flight in October. And what I was doing was listening to every podcast possible. Obviously, Lovefly was very prominent in this. So every podcast I could get my hands on, I was having therapy, I was looking at online courses, and I was listening to any hypno recordings I could get for fear of heights, fear of claustrophobia, fear of
Mm.
flying. And I
Yep.
kind of worked every single day on something so that I never ever missed a beat. So what happens is we get to October and the flight to America, and I was fairly pleased to report that thanks to all the work I'd put in, I didn't have much in the way of anticipatory anxiety. So when
Mm.
we went into the airport, I was strangely relaxed in the back of the car. And when we got to the airport, I was still strangely relaxed. And when we got to the plane, I was even going, something's got to kick in at some point, because right now I still feel really.
Yeah. And I've got this image in my head trying to imagine what strangely relaxed looks like. And I don't know.
Strangely relaxed is what happens when you're not expecting to be relaxed, but you are. So there I was at the airport, and do you know what? I think some of the viewers or the listeners will recall that I actually recorded 3 videos on that flight that I put on Lovefly to try to help other people with the same problems. And in
Mm.
those videos, I explained that actually it was all fantastically good. I cannot describe to you just how well that went, because right from takeoff through the flight itself, right from to landing in Orlando, I really didn't have very much concern at all. It was a wonderful experience. I enjoyed every second of it. And in fact, there was a small clip that my wife filmed for me, and we put on Lovefly, of me dancing in the aisle, and it was a really pathetic bit of dad dancing that my kids were hugely embarrassed by. But the reason for me that was so important was because you've got to remember that historically I couldn't even stand up on a plane.
Mm.
Walking down the aisle to go to the toilet could be a major hazard for me. And that
Yes.
here I was, so happy that I said to my wife, I said, look, please just film this. I'm going to do a stupid dance because it's such a good experience. And I fulfilled that. I did a really stupid dance.
And did you give anybody else a fear as a result of this, or
I don't know. I hope not. Yeah.
No.
So yeah, no. The flight out to America went really, really well. It couldn't have gone better. So that meant that while I was in America, we had a really great time. You know, there was nothing to worry about. I was relaxed. Thinking of the flight home didn't bother me at all.
Mm.
So we were able to have a really good holiday without any anxiety. And then ultimately, after a couple of weeks, you've got to face the return flight. So our
Yes.
return flight was out of Miami. This was all on Virgin, both Virgin flights, and we'd had an A350 going out, which was lovely, and we were due to have a 787 Dreamliner coming back. So all the way up to getting to Miami Airport, I was perfectly fine. I was looking forward to the flight, perfectly relaxed, not an issue anywhere. I really didn't feel anything at all that could be described as fear or problems or anything like that. So I was looking forward to the flight home. So we get on the plane. It is a 787, which is great. I'd never flown on one before, and I was looking forward to it.
Mm.
And it's a night flight. You see, it's dark outside. So when I sat down on the right hand side of the plane by the window, I'm looking outside and it's pitch black, right? Absolutely pitch black. Couldn't see a single detail. And to me, I kind of thought, oh, well, that's okay because it's nighttime. So you'd
Yes.
expect it to be dark. Yeah. But curiously, if you looked out the left-hand windows, you could see all the lights of the airport and all the people going about their business and, the planes and everything. So it took me a while to cotton on. I was sitting there thinking, well, why is it all pitch black on the right-hand side? And yet you can see everything
Yeah,
clearly on the
yeah.
left. Now, it didn't occur to me what had happened, but some people on here will know that the Dreamliner has got dimmable windows. And I hadn't dimmed the windows. I hadn't touched the windows at all. I kept trying to strain my neck to look out of the left side so that I could see some lights and some ground and what have you. But when the plane went to taxi towards the runway, I suddenly thought, well, this is crazy. There's nothing going on the right-hand side. I can't see out.
Mm.
And I began to get just a little bit nervous.
Yes.
There was just a fractional feeling of, hang on a minute, the claustrophobia is kicking in because I can't see out.
Yeah, yeah.
So we took off out of Miami. It was slightly bumpy, nothing too serious, but it was enough just to make me think, oh, this is awful. I can't see out of the window and it's
Mm.
getting bumpy. I kind of need to orientate myself. So I spent a lot of time trying to see out of the left-hand window until we were in the clouds, and then you could see the lights no more and what have you. And as it turns out, to cut a long story short, Paul, the rest of the flight home was fine. It was all perfect. I had a few minutes just during the climb when I wasn't comfortable, but all the rest of the flight home was perfect. I was just going to say, what turned out to be the case is that when we were in the cruise on the way home, I spoke to the cabin staff and I said, I can't see out of my window. And when they checked it, they said, oh God, the whole of the right hand side of the plane is in blanked out mode and it shouldn't be. So
No
I
one
think
else had
they set
noticed.
it. No one else had noticed. We'd all sat there in the dark going, it's dark out there, isn't it? And
Oh
the
no.
cabin director came over to me and he said, look, because I had told him at the beginning of the flight, I said, look, I'm a little bit nervous about this.
Mm.
I had a great flight out, but I'm a bit nervous. I'm not sure what to make of the darkness, And he didn't pick up on it. But afterwards, when he came to see me on the flight home, he went, I'm so sorry. He said,
Oh,
we
that's
blanked out
nice.
all the windows and we didn't mean to. And I was a bit frustrated because I wish I'd been able to see out and see the lights of Miami
Yeah.
as I
Yeah,
climbed away.
exactly.
That would have been nice, and it would have helped to settle my mind a little bit,
Mm.
But that's the way it was. I'm afraid it was darkness, and then when they realised, they obviously put the windows back to normal, and so it meant that come morning time when we were coming over Ireland, I got fantastic views, and it was all
Yes.
very comfortable and happy, and so overall, the point I'm trying to get to is that the whole experience was wonderful. It was superb. I don't feel quite so afeared now, but I also was reminded for a few minutes there that I'm a bit like an alcoholic in recovery. You
Mm.
know, there are going to be moments that could still trigger me, but
Yeah.
I know how to deal with them. I know how to deal with them now. So
Yes, that was a
so that's
really
it.
interesting test, wasn't it? That because I wouldn't like that either. that I would hate not to be able to see out. That would frustrate me, and I don't know if I'd feel disorientated or something, but it's possible, isn't it? Because you just literally lose everything, which is what
Yeah,
happened to you.
yeah, and it was. I mean, luckily it was mercifully short. I mean, I wasn't too bad with it, but it was just in the climb going out when I was desperate to see out and just get some
Mm,
kind of sense of distance or anything like that. And I couldn't. And I just started to think, oh, this is a little bit uncomfortable now. And I had to do a little bit of breathing exercises just to keep myself calm. But
yeah.
it was over within a few minutes. As soon as the bumpiness stopped, it was over. That was very quick. And then I was back to normal and we had a really good flight home.
So that's a great story, and I love the link that you made to the fact that, like, being a recovering alcoholic, that you can't. There's always going to be something that's could trigger you, and you're never a done deal type of thing.
Yeah, I think it's always possible that I could still feel fear because on the flight out it was so good. I was convinced it was completely conquered on every level, and I'm certainly now a much better flyer than I ever was before I discovered Lovefly. I mean, I'm so grateful to you guys for the way I've got help with this because I'm now able to help others. I'm so sufficiently recovered I can help other people. But that flight coming back just gave me a few seconds of going, yeah, don't get too cocky with this. It's a work in progress, you know.
No, well, I don't think anyone's ever describe you as cocky, but I think that is an interesting point. And so one of the things that I was thinking when I was looking over on my notes from our last time we spoke is that you particularly have had, aside from lots of stuff, you specifically have had to conquer claustrophobia and fear of heights. And I just wondered if you could just remind us of some of your tips again, because these have been really popular in case people missed them first time round. Because a lot of people coming in now finding the podcast and going, "Oh my God, I don't know where to start." So they just kind of dipping in and out. They might not get Jamie part one. I'll make sure this is called Jamie part two so they know.
They
But
know there's a
yeah,
first part that they need to go and listen to. Okay.
exactly. But just in case, yeah. So you overcame the claustrophobia and the fear of heights as part of the smorgasbord of things that went with your fear of flying. Yeah. So would you mind just sort of reminding us of some of those sort of things that you used or still use?
Yeah, interestingly, I do believe the claustrophobia and the heights are actually linked in some way because I'm not a claustrophobic in normal everyday life. I don't get bothered in lifts or on the underground or anything like that.
Mm,
I can cope. I can actually cope with small spaces very well, I think, but it's magnified by the fact you're in the air. So I think it's more about a fear of heights and instability, claustrophobia, because I only ever get this claustrophobia on planes. You see.
mm,
So it was more about conquering the fear of height that has done me the best. And there are several ways of doing this as a fearful flyer. I do believe, I do keep saying this, but I do believe that learning the technical side of flying and how a plane stays in the air can help you to overcome a lot of the initial reservations that you might have about height.
yes.
Because because once you realize you're not actually going to be falling from that height, everything seems a lot clearer and a lot better.
Mm,
But one of the tips I've used before, and I feel like I'm boring people if I talk about this again because I've mentioned it so much on the page. But feeling connected to the ground is a very good way of curing a fear of height. And what I used to do when I was young, I came up with this idea that the plane was on a very large pole and that there were wheels on the bottom of the pole and that the pole was supporting the plane and just driving along the ground or through the ocean and the plane was on top of the pole. And I found that as soon as I thought that, when I was fearful on a plane, as soon as I thought about the pole being in touch with the ground, a lot of my fear disappeared. I
mm,
didn't have any problems at all. And then kind of what happened to update you on that is that many years later I saw a therapist about fear of flying and he gave me another similar tip. So I was clearly in the right ballpark
yes.
because
Yeah.
he said the way to deal with heights, and he was talking in this instance, although he was a fear of flying coach, he was talking about buildings. He said, imagine you have got incredibly long legs. So, your legs are 100 stories tall or 7 miles tall or whatever they are, and that you are literally just walking yourself along the ground, but that your head is above the clouds or on the 50th floor of a building or whatever it happens to be. And when I tried that, I thought, well, yeah, this is like my long pole theory, which is that if you're in touch with the ground, you suddenly feel a lot more secure. And I had a trip to Italy a few years ago, and I decided to put this to the test because I was going on a very steep and very high cable car, and I wasn't comfortable about doing it, but I wanted to take the children to the top of the mountain.
Yes.
And so as the cable car went up the side of the mountain, I just thought to myself, you've got massive legs and you're climbing the side of this mountain. And, I sort of literally looked down, imagining I could see my huge legs going all the way down into the trees.
But it worked.
It's very, very bizarre. When you're inside my head, it can be very bizarre sometimes. It makes you wonder what everybody else is thinking, doesn't it? But
no,
but
not really. No, not now. No.
But there I was striding along up the mountainside in Italy on the cable car, and it worked. So I just thought to myself, well, the next time I'm on a plane, I'm going to imagine I'm walking along, and it does help,
With
so,
your like 5 mile legs.
Yes.
I think it's interesting though, Jamie, because it's like, the thing with the brain is that you can trick it, can't you? You can sort of like, we tell ourselves all sorts, it's no different to saying when people are on the ground, they look up and see an aircraft and they get scared because they imagine themselves being in it. And so it's no less or more unusual than that, is it? Because we're not in the aircraft, but it's enough. We can visualize ourselves in it and then get ourselves anxious. Why is it any more strange? You being in an aircraft or at height and then going, well, I've got these long legs, or there's a big pole with wheels on the bottom. If your brain accepts it as some sort of version of like helpful, then what's wrong with that? It's just helpful, positive imagery, isn't it?
Yeah, and I believe, and I'm sure psychologists would tell you the same, that actually that goes a long way to helping soothe the mind with whatever your problems are. If you can just substitute, however bizarre it might be, if you can just substitute some other mechanism for coping, then you'll find that the brain can be easily tricked. So I find that works very well. In fact, interestingly enough, I've got desperate to tell you this other story actually, that there's a kid in my son's football team, right, a 10-year-old boy who's terrified of thunderstorms, and they really send him into a severe panic. But the funny thing is about this kid is that he's also a plane enthusiast. He loves flying, he loves planes. He's the most knowledgeable 10-year-old kid on flying you'll ever meet. And he was having a panic attack the other day at a football match, and it was quite severe, and his parents were there and everyone was worried about him and what have you.
Yeah.
Because there was this big thunderstorm raging. So I went up to him and I said, look, what's your I know his name, I won't give you his name, but I said to him, what's your favorite plane? And he said, oh, it's an Airbus A350. So I said to him, I said, look, do you think Airbus A350s are scared of thunder, or do they just fly through it because they know it's a normal part of their life? And he thought about that for a second. In the middle of a very severe panic attack, he thought about it and his breathing calmed down and he started kind of looking a lot more relaxed. And he said, oh my God, he said, no, an A350 would fly through the thunderstorm, wouldn't it? And his mum and dad were overjoyed. They said, that's an amazing thing to say, because all you do is you substitute his fear for something that he understands and that works for him. And suddenly it's not so scary.
Oh, I love that.
So, and his parents, actually, they sent me a message much later that day after the football tournament had finished to say, look, you really helped with our son, because, he's now talking about being a plane rather than being scared of thunderstorms.
I just think that's amazing. I mean, I love that you've been able to sort of apply your wisdom. So I reckon that someone's probably listening to this now thinking, oh, I quite like that. I mean, I know some people
well,
have said,
so.
Yeah, I hope so. I think what I'd be thinking if I was listening to this now, I'd be thinking, oh, I wonder if I could apply that to my fear, like so. So for some people, their claustrophobia is particularly linked to the doors being, that when you land, you've got to wait that certain amount of time before you can get off. That's their specific thing, or it'll be linked to, I get on board the aircraft and there's one aisle, not two aisles, and that makes me feel closed in. So I'm just wondering whether there's ways to tweak what you've just said into those type of scenarios. And I'm kind of putting you on the spot, but I think there's some great wisdom there, Jamie. So if you could just answer all those questions and all those problems, I'd be very grateful.
Yeah, well, it's I came up with that on the spur of the moment. Really, I just thought anything I can do to substitute his fear for something he understands, and just by coincidence, he happened to understand and like planes. So that worked very well because. Yeah, no, it was just something I came up with on the spur of the moment to substitute something he was scared of with something he knew and understood. And luckily, planes and thunder actually kind of go together. So, it was a good example to use in that scenario, I think.
Yeah, I think you're right. So thinking now, you've learned a lot now. If you talk about yourself and flying, what sort of language do you tend to use now?
It's a lot more positive. Just to bring you up to speed, I'm flying again at the end of this month.
Excellent.
Taking the family to Europe. Normally by now I would be terrified with only 2 weeks to go. But actually, so far, no problems, no fears. I'm totally confident of making that flight happy. And I might just listen to a podcast or a hypnotape a day or two before. But other than that, I'm pretty confident it's going to go.
That's amazing. You sound like you're on it, basically.
Yeah, no, I'm pretty confident this is going to go well. And I even thought to myself, well, I might do some more videos for Lovefly. Who knows? I might film out the window and talk about it and
more dancing.
See if I can impart more dancing. Who knows? Maybe less dancing. Maybe I shouldn't dance. But we'll play it by ear. But yes, I'm looking forward to going.
Well, I'm just really pleased at the progress you've made. And it's not without hard work, is it? You've put a lot of time and work into this,
Yeah, that's the key to it. This is one of the takeaway tips from this podcast, I think, for the Love Flyers, is that I don't think this comes easy to people. And I think that the way to conquer it is, for some people, it's harder than you think, and it's going to take longer than you realize. So for me, I tend to over prepare for everything in my life, right? Everything, even this podcast, I over prepare for everything. And I think that's the tip that you need for conquering a fear as big as flying. You have to work on it every day. You have to listen to the right resources. You have to read the right books and never give up. Never, ever feel that you've been knocked back. Always, always keep going with it.
I love that. That's just pure Jamie wisdom. That is genius.
Oh, that's very kind of you to say. No, I was just going to say there was just a couple of things I was going to just mention. Really, I mean, I don't have any more tips as such that are really, really good ones. I haven't found those earth-shattering answers to the fear in the last few months any more than I had on the last one. But I did think of I don't have any more tips than I had last time. None that are really earth-shattering. But I did think of one the other day actually that just came to mind. And that is that my daughter did a trip to Italy and she was flying in both directions. And when she got back, while I was waiting for her to get back from the trip, I was looking at flight radar and I checked out her precise plane. And her plane was on its 6th sector of the day. And it was having arrived back in London, it was going to be flying back to Italy that night. And it occurred to me that whilst we all take our flights and they're very, dramatic and very scary and very exciting, and we think it's a really big deal for us, for the plane and probably the cruise, it is so mundane. It is so everyday. It is so much a part of their normal daily life. Just another everyday task. Planes, going from Bologna to Ibiza to Bologna somewhere else, back to Bologna, then Bologna to London, then back from London to Bologna.
Yeah. And
I was thinking, this is an everyday experience. Every flight that plane does, it's probably bored out of its brains. We sit there in fear, thinking that this is the journey that's going to change our life, and actually, it really isn't. You know, this is a very, very ordinary thing for the people doing the flying. Funnily enough, I was chatting to a guy who's a parent at my daughter's school, and he's a pilot for the Saudi royal family.
Right.
And because I'm in flying, so I kind of drilled him on a few questions, and he said the biggest thing he has to overcome is boredom, because he spends his entire life flying between Saudi Arabia, London, and Zurich. That's his route for the royal family is Saudi Arabia, London, Zurich. And he said, really, I just want something to happen that's going to liven me up, because it is so everyday, it's so mundane. And I thought, well, there's a tip for the love flyers as well. Not only are the planes doing this routinely every single day, but the pilots are too. They know their stuff, and it's well within their capabilities.
Yeah, that's a great insight, Jamie. Actually, that's really good.
So so that's what I've learned from this time around. How's that?
That's very good. A nice, positive, and very sort of down to earth tips. I think that people will be able to relate to those. And just for those who are thinking, oh yeah, but the pilots are bored now. How do they keep themselves entertained? That's why you have two pilots, and that's why you have rest, and that's why you have checklists. So there's lots and lots that goes on to help keep the pilots awake and alert. There's some really nice wisdom there. So maybe just we'll wrap up here. And I just want to say a massive thank you to all you've done and all the contributions you've made in the group and continue to do. Really grateful to you for the time we've talked and all your sharing of time and expertise. I'm very, very grateful.
There's no problem, Paul. I'm really grateful to you for having me on. I'm really pleased to do it. And I'll just finish with one thing. I saw an advert the other day for EasyJet recruiting over 55-year-olds.
Oh,
and I
nice.
thought to myself, because I'm 55 now, I'm 55, and I thought, do you know what? I've never fully considered a career in the aviation industry before, but I might just get in touch with EasyJet and see what they've got going for over 55-year-olds. I'm that confident.
That is amazing. Well, that'll be a great podcast episode. That'll be Jamie Part 3, cabin crew or pilot. We don't know.
No, thank you. It's lovely to talk to you. Thanks for having me on.
Amazing. Thanks, Jamie. Great to see you again, mate. And yeah, good luck and hope the flight goes well. We look forward to your pictures and videos and more dancing. Cheers, mate. Thank you for listening to the Lovefly podcast. I hope you found it useful. Now, as always, if you need any extra help, please join our Lovefly Facebook group. You can also follow us on Instagram at loveflyhelp. And also, if you go to our website, which is lovefly.co.uk/shop, you can see other ways that you can get some help. Thanks for listening.